In the course of your spiritual path, not everyone supports you and not everyone approves. This full moon is in PURVA PHALGUNI Nakshatra, and a really well-known native is Madonna. Madonna was not this blank canvas waiting for somebody to show her what to be. She was a woman with a vision, and what her vision was, what her creativity was, evolved over time, but she was the one with the vision. She was the one with the creativity. She was the one with the hard work. She was also the one who never stopped to ask people what they thought. She wasn't concerned if people liked her or agreed with what she was doing or how was she doing in the polls. She wasn't really concerned with public opinion. She had a vision and she realized that creative vision. So she is this epitome of creative force energy. Now, Phalguni means the pink fleshy parts of a woman. So this nakshatra is very much about sex, and sex is creativity. Sexual energy is creative energy. The two are not separate. The nakshatra is in Leo. All of these elements are encompassed in the 5th house. So anytime you are creating something, it's with this sexual energy. Now let's think about it for a minute in your own life. Esoterically, sex is not something that is stigmatized as it is in many cultures. So let's apply that principle in our own lives. While the words are very easy to say, be yourself, express yourself, be who you want to be, there are consequences to being who you want to be, especially if you are on a spiritual path, especially if you have some sense of purpose in the world, especially if you walk with direction and know that the endeavors you undertake have some more significant purpose. So what you are creating, not everybody sees it. Actually, nobody sees it. Only you see it. Other people can get pieces of it and maybe get an idea of what you're doing if they are so inclined to think that way. But you can't ever count on anybody to know what you're doing. So what happens is somebody will step in without knowing what the big picture looks like, without really knowing what you're creating, and they just pick apart the little things that you do. They pick apart the little pieces of how you do things. They see sections of your work and critique those sections, but they don't see the whole of your work. Only you see the whole of your work. So again, while it seems very easy to say, oh, just be yourself, walk with your purpose, there are consequences. If you have people around you who, for example, have different religious views or different spiritual views, sometimes you're ostracized, sometimes you're considered evil, sometimes you're considered bad, there are consequences. If you have questions about what's going on, and for example, you go to see a mental health professional, and they don't know what you're talking about because they don't see the esoteric world, they don't have the abilities you have, they don't have the sight that you have, they'll look at you like you're crazy, and then that doesn't help at all. Or if you talk to just a regular person who doesn't have what you have, they don't see what you see, and they don't have the capacity to understand what you're talking about. What happens is that each time we encounter those situations, even though you know better, but still it chips away at you little by little by little. So it's not the grand sense of purpose, it's these little things, it's these small pebbles in your shoe that make the walk harder, that make the journey harder. But all of these parts that other people think are weird, that other people don't understand, but these parts that are actually the most interesting part of you, if you could talk about anything, this is what you would talk about. Keep developing those parts. Keep developing those parts. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says. Keep developing those parts because they are your most interesting parts. What you're curious about, this is what cures you. What you have the eye to see, the truth as you understand it, your perspective, that is what makes you your unique self. And nobody can see that but you. That means nobody else has that to offer to the world except you. So when these times come, when these small incisions of doubt come at you, you remember only you see what you see. And the fact that you see it, it's very important to bring it into the world. And that's what this nakshatra is about. The moon is in PURVA PHALGUNI Nakshatra. Preceding that was Maga, the ancestors, and PURVA PHALGUNI is becoming immersed in another body. So you are out of the world and now you're in the world and creating. It's the power of positive procreation, actually the ability to create something. The symbols of it are a bed or a cot, a hammock, a platform. So what's associated with it is, think a platform, a guru, somebody teaching on a platform. So knowledge, and then the bed, a resting place. So a place temporarily where knowledge comes into the world and has a place to be expressed, but for now is resting. This energy also has to do with purging and releasing, because when something new comes in, we have to have let something else go. So these past few months, where we've been working on these changing situations and deciding what stays, what serves our highest purpose, what serves our path versus what impedes our path, we're making these changes. And we're looking at our relationships, and we're looking at our livelihoods, and we're looking at our pastimes, and we're looking at our friends, and deciding what's there versus what should go. Everything that you've released, everything that you've calmly closed the door on, has made room for now this creative energy from above. This nakshatra is also about divine partnership. So it's something from above that the individual is trying to merge with. It's the soul being let loose in the material world to gather knowledge, and then looking at who we partner with, how we partner with ourselves, and are we working with ourselves or against ourselves? So the lunar period of these next 2 weeks is this place of rest and acknowledging what's now come into your life, what resources you have available to you, and looking at what your soul is here to do. Creative energy is sexual energy. So for a minute, let's consider the tie between nudity and knowledge. Think of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, that story. Adam and Eve were naked. That wasn't the problem. The problem is when they became aware of the fact that they were naked. So it wasn't the nudity itself, it was awareness of it. We are made to feel so ashamed of our sex, of our body, of our physical desires, our imaginative desires. There's barely a place you can look where someone's not trying to make you feel self-conscious because they're trying to also sell you a solution. It can take a lifetime just to get over not feeling self-conscious about your appearance or your body or what your utility is to the opposite sex, because we even conceptualize our own usefulness to how, especially as women, whether or not men find us attractive. Thus, like, if men find us sexually useful to them. So it's interesting, right? Like, that dynamic's not the problem, but calling attention to that dynamic, awareness, and then bringing to conscious awareness that we are aware that that's happening. That's the problem. That's when you become a feminist. That's when you become a loudmouth person. That's when you become problematic, when you start to make other people feel uncomfortable. And that has to do with people who are trying to use your energy and redirect your creative energy, your sexual energy, in a way that's useful to them. Whereas this nakshatra is having you bring it back to yourself and the knowledge of how powerful that is and what you can do if that energy is harnessed and directed in a productive way. Uranus is in the 4th house in this chart, and the 4th house is our place of origin, our sense of home. It can either be the literal home or where we feel at home. And the fact that Uranus is present in the 4th house in this chart is indicating that how we feel about home is going to change. The setup alone of this chart is very telling. The first thing is what's called a bucket. So you have the moon, the handle, and then all of the other planets below. So you have the moon, your internal, your mentality, how you feel about things, your emotional state, casting light on all of the other elements. So how you're feeling about something, how you've been thinking about something, how you've been internally processing something. Now you're looking at that new mentality and you're looking at all of the areas of your life that you've been processing this information. The other thing, right? So the moon is in the 8th house and the sun is in the 2nd. So the 2-8 axis is the same axis that the eclipses were on back in December. The 2nd house has to deal with esteem. It also has to deal with our stuff, the money you make from the work that you do, but your esteem, reinforced by the stuff you have to speak for you. That's opposed to where the moon is now in the 8th house, and the 8th house is about alchemy and transformation and going deep. Your most vulnerable self is the 8th house. So when you're done with your transit in the 8th house, it's a different type of self-esteem. It's a self-esteem that's invisible. So whereas the 2nd house is your stuff, but you have something to show for it, and that's how you derive your esteem, 8th house is something different. So it's the esteem you get from the spiritual work that you've done, but on the exterior, you don't have anything tangible to show for it. So consider how that shows up in the world. how we consider somebody who has done well. You have cool stuff. You have a nice house. You have a good income. You've got a cool car. You've got nice clothes. You can go places. You have stuff. So your stuff somehow speaks for you. And the way we get wrapped up in that is very subtle. How you get to see what you're really about is after that 8th house action. When you come out the other side of your 8th house, the strength that you have is internal. It's a spiritual strength that you've had. So that's what this new moon is. Moon is in the 8th house, so you're going through something internal. Any growth you have that happens internally, nobody gives you a paycheck for that. So if it feels like thankless work, that's because socially it's not something that's particularly valued. The aspects for this chart are very interesting too. You have Saturn square Uranus as a feature. So Saturn, structure, coming up against Uranus, disruptions. So disruptions in your structure. Pluto is trining Mars. Pluto, looking underneath things. And then Mars, what are you going to do about it? So now that you have this truth, what are you going to do about it? Moon, trining Uranus. Trine means that this is just a very natural energy flow. So you are now in the mood to do something unexpected. Gemini, sun, moon, and rising. This full moon is taking place in your 3rd house. And your 3rd house is how you take in new information, how you think, how you process quickly, how you communicate with others. It also has to do with short distance travel, your community, what's in proximity to you, your siblings. So the things that are around you and how you take in information and communicate it with others. It also has to do with commerce and marketing. So the new moon is asking you who is in proximity to you. And in these areas of what's around you, how you're taking in information, how you're processing information, how you think about things, how you communicate things, it's looking at what is your creative expression and how are you being perceived by others in terms of like, how are you taking care of yourself? What is the level of trust within you and with you and the people you're dealing with? Because your creative expression will depend on how comfortable you are. And if you don't trust the people around you, if there's not an agreed upon mode of conduct, then you're on shaky ground and you expend mental energy worrying about those relationships rather than understanding you are on solid ground and being able to focus and direct all of your energy into your creative endeavors. An example of this, if you have a situation with if you have a relationship with your siblings, 3rd house is siblings, you conduct yourself in a certain way, but your siblings are playing by a different set of rules. But they're not saying that they play by a different set of rules. They just are. So you're in sort of this hidden conflict situation, and this can be for siblings, this can be for anybody you communicate with, right? But you're in this hidden kind of conflict where it's not overt, but you are still expending mental energy because you have to think about the moves and you have to think about what's going to happen. You have to think about the conduct because not everybody has agreed upon and is adhering to set conduct for what this relationship will be. So you'll never do your best in anything when you have to worry about who's around you. And you'll never achieve everything that's possible or even get close to it if you have the sieving off of energy where you have to worry about the people who are close to you. So that's what this new moon is asking you to do, is look at what's around you, look at who's around you, check out the level of trust, check out the level of geniality, and how is that helping or hindering your creative process? Because remember, anytime you're thinking about conflict, you are not in a place to be thinking about anything creative, unless it has to deal with conflict, like my work. Now, 3rd house is across from 9th house. 9th house has to do with higher thinking, higher philosophy, higher education, travel, expansion, right? So 3rd house is like in the immediate, how you take in information. And then 9th house is a bigger way in how you deal, like what you do with it on a larger scale, like how you expand it. So how you are feeling and how your relationships are going in your immediate proximity, where the moon is shining light onto, okay, so what does that look like in the big picture? And that's what this moon cycle is about. Now you have some other aspects you're dealing with too. Pluto is in your 8th house of transformation. So you have the planet of transformation in the house of transformation. And then Uranus is in your 12th house. And that is your hidden self, your spirituality, where you retreat, where you go to be alone. So Pluto has been transiting your 8th house. You're looking at the depths of your subconscious. You're looking at the dark shadows. You're looking at the hidden things. You're looking at all the things that you didn't want to unearth. you're going through this underworld. And it's been Pluto who's been going through this underworld. So you are really cleaning out all the depths of yourself and looking at how you deal with relationships, how you deal with trust, how you deal with sharing, who can you trust to share with. Eighth house also has to do with large sums of money, with philanthropy, not charity work, but foundations, like big money. It also has to do with legacy, so like what you're leaving in the world. What is the result of you having been here? This is all eighth house stuff. Pluto has been taking you through it. And now that you've seen everything, there's a trine with Mars in your house of spirituality. Now that you've seen the things that are subconsciously holding you back, now that you've seen what needs cleaned out, now that you've gone through this transformation, what are you going to do about it? And what you're going to do about it, this Mars is coming out in, nobody's going to see it, but for you, it's going to take place in the quiet recesses of your mind. It's going to take place behind the scenes. It's going to take place in your spiritual life. That's where the action is. You have Uranus in your 11th house. And your 11th house has to do with your friends, your networks, your associations, the people you hang out with by choice. So some unexpected things there. It is squaring Saturn, which is also in your 8th house. So how you think about your friends and how you think about your networks and maybe who you think they are, who you think they should be, who you think will get you ahead. Saturn is, pragmatic's not really the right word, kind of ruthless, kind of cutting edge, mercenary-like. Saturn is not a warm, cuddly, feely kind of thing. Saturn gets things done. And Saturn is a cold planet that gets things done. So when Saturn is looking at your friend, like Saturn in the 8th house is like, how do I transform? How do I transform? And then it's looking at the 11th house, who are the people who are around me, who can help me transform. There's a square, which means there's something unexpected that's going to happen in the 11th house, and it's different than how you thought it would be. And something else that can come, like you might be given a position of prestige, you might be part of a new group, but whatever's going to happen in the 8th house, which would have to do with your transformation, it's going to happen in a different way than you had thought about it and that you had thought was possible. Your sun in the 9th house is also trining Uranus in the 11th. So your sun is your action, right? So the moon is trining Uranus. So how you've been feeling about things, you're ready to take new action. So you're feeling okay about it. And then the sun is the initiation. It's the physical expression. And you're going to have an opportunity to do something. So watch what happens with your friends and network, because that's an interesting place for you just now. Have you noticed that the places you once were are not the places you can be anymore? Where you've come from, that ground is burned behind you. Who you used to know, not only do they not do it for you anymore, but you physically have a hard time being around them. Energetically, it just doesn't fit anymore. It's just not a match anymore. But more than intellectually challenging, it's actually physically challenging. It's energetically challenging. Socially, that's very awkward because you don't fit in. You fit in fewer and fewer places. But in a spiritual sense, this is good news because it means you're growing. So it means the clearing out. And then the people you're going to meet, you're now making room for them and they are an energetic match. Maybe they're not doing exactly what you are doing, but you guys are headed in the same direction. And you'll find more people who are headed in a similar direction. This is growth. So here's how to use the energy for the next couple weeks. PURVA PHALGUNI is the coming together of things. So the feminine aspect from above and the masculine aspect, the material aspect from below. You're bringing them together. And this nakshatra is a place where the knowledge finds temporary rest and is regrouping and deciding what to do. So you have Kama, the purpose, the desire to create something. You have Venus, the ruler, who imparts wisdom and counsel and advice. And you have Vishnu, the deity, which is about the preservation of what is coming into being. So presently, we're at a place where your soul is finding rest before you begin the next stages of your journey. So what you can do in this time, pull your resources together, right? If you haven't watched the last video of the new moon, watch it. Along your path, when things weren't going how you thought they should go, you learned a lot of other things. You encountered a lot of other people. You maybe worked at different jobs, you learned different trades, you maybe developed abilities, you met people who taught you things, you had time to read things, you had time to learn things. But what your knowledge looks like now, what your experience looks like now, is far more advanced than probably what you think it is. Because what you learn when things aren't going how you think, that's its own university. So you pull your resources together. Who do you know now? What do you know now? How can you apply it now? And you start to plan your next moves. And then the second element of this is that service is based on friendship and trust. So who's around you? Who can help you move in the direction you're moving? Who can you trust? It's odd too, as you start to enter into these things, people you've known forever or for a long time, they don't know what you're talking about. And then you can meet somebody who is a perfect stranger and you fall right into that conversation because you speak the same language. So we're looking at who's not an energetic or spiritual fit for you and who is an energetic or spiritual fit for you to enhance your ability to bring your creative expression into the world. So for right now, pull your resources together, integrate all of the experiences you've come through, and appreciate how difficult your journey's been and how far you've come and all of the things you know now. It's not a small thing. So take inventory, integrate, consider your partnerships, and rest.